Rimhold Outpost sat on black gravel that never stayed still. Wind pushed it like a slow tide, and the dust made everything look worn. Tonight, the wall dose meter clicked faster. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady enough to remind everyone that time here was paid in exposure. Jace Marrow wiped grease from his fingers and listened to the repair bay settle. A coolant pump coughed once, then smoothed out. The smell of scorched polymer clung to the air. On his bench lay a cracked face shield and a bent plate. A quarter turn of the wrong tool had done it. At Rimhold, almost fixed was how people died. The bay door banged open. A runner stumbled in, mask fog from his breath. He held out a cracked wrist unit like it was bleeding. Marrow, you are up. Now. Jace took the unit and scanned the alert. A patrol had found 3 Kethri clan walkers pinned near the Ashline belt. Their shielding was failing. The next dust sweep would spike the dose. The problem was not distance. The problem was minutes. How long? Jace asked. The runner swallowed. Less than an hour. The belt is turning. Jace grabbed a field kit, spare seal packs, and water. He took 2 liters, hesitated, then took a third. At Rimhold, water was mercy and fuel. As he locked the kit, one thought cut through the urgency and stayed there. Why was a brigade patrol close enough to find Kethri walkers at the belt edge, right before a sweep? The rover ride was short and rough. The sky had a pale bruise color that meant charged particles were stirring. Gravel rattled under the wheels. The horizon shimmered with dust that looked calm until it was not. By the time they reached the edge markers, the ground changed as if it remembered heat. The air tasted faintly metallic. The Kethri were not soldiers. Their bodies were lean and wrapped in layered cloth. Over that, they wore drift plate harness frames. Heavy plates were bolted to those frames, dull and pitted and patched like old cookware. A woman stepped between Jace and the injured, chin lifted. Her eyes tracked his hands, not his face. Another woman stayed beside her, one hand on a tool roll, the other on a small dose meter. I'm Celine Rusk, the first said. Her words were careful and learned. This is Varia Rusk. You fix what keeps us breathing. Jace nodded once and knelt by the nearest harness. Heat radiated through the plate stack. The coolant spine was warm, too warm. The airflow was weak. The wearer breathed shallow through a filter mask that rattled with each inhale. The sound made Jace think of sand and gears. You have minutes, Celine said, glancing at the horizon. Dust was rising, slow and steady. Not hours. I heard, Jace said. My goal is simple. I close the seam and get you moving before the sweep. Varia watched him, eyes sharp. She did not nod. She only waited to see if he would lie. Jace slid a probe along the seams. Under the plates, the sable glass we've caught the floodlight like ash trapped in ice. It was not pretty, but it was dense. The density told a story procurement officers cared about more than people. His probe hit a soft spot. The seal thread at the shoulder joint was torn. A gap no wider than a fingernail ran under the plate. You did not feel radiation when it entered. You only felt tired later, then sick, then gone. Who did you last repair? Jace asked. Varia answered, voice flat. No one. We used it until it screamed. Jace looked up at Celine. She did not flinch. Can you close it? Celine asked. I can, Jace said, but I need shade and water for cooling. Celine glanced again at the dust line. You have minutes, not hours. Jace set up a portable shade sheet between 2 rocks. It flapped in the wind, but it cut the glare. He laid out parts like a surgeon, because every item here had a cost. He checked the coolant spine first. The return flow was thin. He cracked a valve and caught the first drops in a cup. The coolant was gritty, like someone had poured sand into blood. Jace poured a mouthful of clean water over the spine, housing, to pull heat away. Water was rationed at Rimhold, but heat killed faster than hunger. The wearer flinched, then steadied as the temperature dropped. He pried the shoulder plate loose with a slim bar. The bolts were hand-cut and uneven. He kept them in order anyway. In war, you respected what kept people alive, even when it was ugly. The torn seal thread looked frayed and brittle. Heat, cycles, and abrasive dust had cooked it. Jace cleaned the channel with a brush and a puff of dry gas. He did not blow with his mouth. Moisture ruined his seal. A patrol soldier crouched beside him, visor down. Can we move them now? Not yet, Jace said. If we move them, the gap widens. Then you carry a body. The soldier backed off and watched the horizon as if he could stare the dust away. Jace pulled a strip of new seal thread from his pack, then paused. His issue thread was strong, but it was not made for Kethri grooves. Their tolerances were different. Varia watched him and set it before he could force the mistake. You will force it, and it will tear again. Then show me, Jace said. She slid him a thin wedge of dark fiber from her roll. It was almost weightless. Sable glass off-cut, Varia said. Lay it under the thread. Spread the stress. It felt wrong in his gloves, like touching someone else's ration. Still, he used it. He laid the off-cut, pressed the seal thread into place, and heat set it with a low lamp. Celine stayed silent through the work. She watched the wearer's breathing and counted clicks on her dose meter. When Jace glanced at her display, he saw the window was narrow. The click rate was rising. Jace tapped his own meter and then pointed at hers. Your sensor drifts, he said. If it lies, you die. Celine held it out. Jace adjusted the baseline with a tiny screw, then handed it back. When the lamp cooled, Celine finally spoke. You fixed the harness that keeps our lungs clean, she said. That is not a service. That is a bond. Jace tightened the plate back down and checked the seam with his probe. The gap was gone. Airflow returned as a soft hiss. The wearer coughed, then drew a fuller breath. They will live, Jace said. Celine nodded once. Then you must live with us. Jace blinked. What? Varia answered, voice steady like a rule recited at dawn. The forge bond. If an outsider touches the life seam, they become family. It stops thieves. It stops empty promises. I am enlisted, Jace said. I have orders. I cannot just marry into a clan. Celine stepped closer. She was not threatening, but she did not move like someone who could be pushed. You can walk away, Celine said. Then we will not wear your repairs. We will not take your water. We will not let you into Kethri Forgeold. When your people come, they will meet silence. The dust wall grew taller on the horizon. It moved with slow certainty. Jace understood the leverage. He also understood what silence could do to a garrison that needed local knowledge. If I accept, Jace said, what do you expect from me? Varia did not soften. You stay. You answer when we call. You do not lie about dose. Celine added, quiet and heavy. And you do not treat us like a debt. Jace nodded once. The decision sat in his mouth like grit. Tell me how the bond is done. Celine brought out a narrow ring of braided metal. It had a simple latch that could be opened in the dark. She placed it in his palm. By hand, Celine said. By witnesses. By a promise that can be tested. Jace closed his fist around the ring. Wind hissed through grit. The Ashline belt waited beyond the markers, patient and indifferent. When the dust sweep finally passed, the Kethri moved the injured behind a low ridge. Jace helped carry a harness frame that weighed more than it looked. His gloves stuck to grit and sweat, and his own dose meter never stopped clicking. Back at Rimhold Outpost, the repair bay felt smaller than before. The wall meter kept clicking. The number did not care about vows. Celine and Varia followed him inside. They did not wander. They stood where they could see the exit, the tool racks, and the water locker. A message arrived before Jace could wash his hands. It came through the outpost net, stamped with Ashline Security Brigade. The cinder line carried a name that made the room go quiet. Colonel Brannick Vale. The order was short. Provide a sample of sable glass weave. Provide access to Kethri Forgeold. Report by next cycle. Failure would be treated as interference with security operations. Jace read it twice. The question he had carried from the rover ride finally sharpened into something colder. So this was why the patrol had been close. A second knock sounded at the bay door. Field Auditor Nessa Quill entered with 2 clerks and a portable printer. Her uniform was clean. Her eyes were not. Technician Marrow, Nessa said. I am here to document cooperation. She set a stack of forms on Jace's bench. Each page had places for names, dates, and signatures. There were empty lines for inventory. Nessa smiled like a person offering relief. This protects everyone, she said. We log material. We log transfer. We avoid misunderstandings. Jace looked at the word transfer and heard theft. Celine stepped closer and placed her palm on the edge of the bench. She did not touch the forms. You will turn our lives into numbers, Celine said. Nessa kept her tone polite. Security requires clarity. Your clan will be compensated. Various spoke, quiet and cutting. Compensation does not close a seam. Jace felt trapped between his oath to the core and the ring in his pocket. He did not know which one would kill him first. Celine leaned in toward him, voice low enough that the clerks could not catch it. If we give them our weave, we die slowly, she said. If we refuse, they will come fast. Either way, they call it lawful. Jace stared at the forms. The ink was still wet on the first page. For the first time, he understood the enemy in full. It was not the rifle. It was the pen that decided who counted. He picked up the top sheet and did not sign. Not yet, he said. Nessa's smile thinned. Then I will note resistance, she replied. And resistance has consequences. Outside, a siren tested its voice and fell silent. The outpost lights shifted toward night cycle, like a calm lie. Next cycle, paper arrived with a clean edge and a dirty purpose. In the admin pod beside Rimhold Outpost, the air smelled of printer resin and antiseptic wipes. Jace Marrow stood across a metal table from field auditor Nessa Quill and tried not to look at the water ration box in the corner. The box had a seal tag, and the tag meant someone could lock the lid with a signature. Nessa slid a thin folder toward him. Order of requisition, Technician Marrow. Signed authority. You understand what this means. Jace opened the folder and saw Director Halden Core's name pressed into the page. The words above it were calm and exact. Sable Glass Weave was to be transferred to the Scriptwrite Directorate for security purposes. Kethri Forgehold was to grant access to the Cold Anvil rig for inspection. The stated intent was to shorten the war and reduce total casualties. Celine Rusk stood to Jace's left, posture still. You call it reduction, Celine said. We call it removal. Nessa kept her smile. The Ashline Security Brigade needs shielding for a corridor operation. If they move through the belt, the conflict ends sooner. That saves lives on both sides. Varia Rusk stood behind Celine, tool roll clipped to her belt. You want our weave because your plates fail, Varia said. Jace felt the ring in his pocket press into his thigh. In the core, bonds were paperwork and benefits. In the Kethri clans, a bond was a rule that survived hunger and sand. It did not care about rank. He turned a page and saw a line item for water allocation, marked as contingent support. The offer was simple. Give material and receive water. Receive medicine. Receive time. Celine leaned forward. Without drift plate harness, my people cannot cross the Ashline window, she said. When the wind shifts, the dose drops for a short time. That is when we move children and elders. If you strip our harnesses, we will be trapped on the wrong side. We will fade. Jace pictured it. A line of families waiting for a safe hour that never came. Cooling spines running hot. Mouths dry because drinking water had been poured onto metal to keep it from cooking a spine. War was often decided by engines and guns, but death arrived by thirst and heat. Nessa tilted her head. The Directorate will relocate your community to a safer zone. Safer for whom? Celine asked. Jace set the folder down. Auditor Quill, if you pull weave from their harnesses, you change the fit, he said. You change the cooling path. The failure is slow, then sudden. You will write it as natural loss. Nessa watched him the way a clerk watches a stamp. Technician, your duty is to your core, she replied. The Kethri are not enlisted. Celine's voice sharpened. He is bound. If you take what keeps us alive, you take him with it. A chime sounded from the wall unit. The outpost net pushed a hazard update. Dust density rising. Charged particle count trending upward. A second notice followed, warning that the next Ashline window might narrow. Jace stepped to the display and scanned the forecast map. A pale band of red crawled toward their sector. It was not a wall you could outrun by fear. It was math, and it did not negotiate. He turned back. You do not have weeks, he said. The belt is rising. If you push a corridor with dishonest dose data and without cooling water, you will stack bodies and call it victory. Nessa collected the unsigned forms. Then sign before the next cycle, she said. Or I will document noncompliance. She walked out without haste. When the door shut, Celine exhaled controlled. Varia spoke quietly. They do not need guns yet, she said. They have paper. Colonel Brannick Vale arrived by video link that night, his face lit by a command screen, his uniform pressed too clean for Vesper 9. The transmission came through Rimhold's main comm pod, with 2 guards at the door and a clerk sitting in as witness. Jace could hear generators through the wall, the outpost breathing like an animal that never fully rested. Jace sat at the table. Celine and Varia stood behind him. The clerk kept his eyes down. Vale did not waste greetings. Technician Marrow, I am told you have contact with the Kethri clans, he said. This is an opportunity to prevent prolonged suffering. Vale tapped a control, and a list appeared on a side panel. Food packs, antibiotics, filter cartridges, portable shelter, protection status for Kethri movement under brigade escort. In exchange, Sableglass weave samples and access to cold amble rig. We will stabilize your situation, Vale said. You will support the corridor operation. That corridor ends the war sooner. Varia answered, sharp but controlled. You stabilize us until we cannot breathe without you, she said. Then you decide what we are worth. Vale's expression barely changed. Dependency is an emotional term, he replied. Logistics is reality. Jay saw a line about dose monitoring support, bundled with brigade-issued meters. He thought of the last unit he had repaired, a filter mask with hairline cracks no one wanted to report because it slowed the schedule. I want your dose calibration, Jace said. The raw tables, the radiant ledger. Vale's eyes narrowed a fraction. Why? Because if your ledger is wrong, your corridor kills your own, Jace said. And you will still come for their weave after. Vale held his gaze, then nodded. Auditor Quill will provide the ledger for review, he said. You will return a recommendation by morning. The link cut. An hour later, Nessa Quill arrived with a sealed drive and printed tables. One review only, she said. No copies. Jace spread the pages under a lamp in the repair bay. Celine watched the door. Varia watched his hands. The baseline dose values sat lower than they should for the Ashline belt edge. Jace compared them to his shop logs and the Kethri wrist units he had tuned. The mismatch was not noise. It was design. A quiet shove that kept alarms from screaming until it was too late. He found the offset, framed as drift correction, applied across the brigade inventory. Enough to keep a column moving. Enough to make fear look like cowardice. Varia leaned in. They make the meter lie, she said. They make the soldier brave by stealing the warning, Jace replied. Celine's voice stayed flat. And when they fall sick, the paper will say the belt changed. Jace held up the drive. Auditor Quill, this is not correction, he said. This is manipulation. Nessa did not flinch. It is standardization, she replied. The brigade cannot halt for every spike. They need consistency. Consistency gets people killed, Jace said. Nessa looked at him with practiced patience. War gets people killed, she answered. The directorate chooses the least wasteful path. A short siren burst outside. A runner shouted in the corridor. Metal doors clanged as someone sealed a passage. Celine turned toward the bay door. That is near our water, she said. They ran. The Kethri water cache sat in a shaded alcove near the outer wall, drums stacked on pallets. A thin stream ran from the bottom of one drum, spreading into the dust. The smell was wrong, sharp and metallic, the way blood smelled when it hit hot metal. A brigade medic knelt beside it. It is contaminated, he said. Metal taste. Do not drink. Jace stared at the broken latch. The metal was bent inward, like it had been struck and released. The drum seal tag was still intact. Someone had not stolen water. Someone had poisoned the choice. Varia touched the wet dust with a tool tip, then held it to her dose meter. The click rate jumped. She dragged the tip across a clean patch and checked again. The difference was obvious. Celine's shoulders stiffened. No one fired a shot, she said. And still you took her throat. Jace. Look back toward the admin pod where Nessa's forms lived. He understood the move. Make them thirsty. Make the offer feel like rescue. Make surrender look responsible. Dawn brought a thin gray light and a line of Kethri at the bay door, each holding a cup, each waiting for a ration measured in sips. The outpost water lockers stayed sealed. The only water that moved was what Jace could drag through a filter that was never meant to feed a clan. Jace set up his field filter on a crate and fed the first liters through. The filter slowed as grit loaded into its core. He watched the output stream and thought about heat. Water used for drinking could not be used for cooling. Water used for cooling could not be used for washing wounds. Every plan ended in a cup. Celine organized the line without raising her voice. She used names, not numbers, and that alone kept some dignity alive. Varia checked each cup with her dose meter before handing it over, then wiped the rim with a clean cloth that grew dirtier by the minute. Jace listened to the dose meters across the bay. The sound was not loud, but it was steady like rain you cannot see. He thought of Vale's list of support items and felt the trap tighten. Help that could be removed was a leash. Near mid-morning, Nessa Quill returned with 2 guards and a medical officer Jace did not recognize. She carried a clipboard, not a weapon. Under emergency hygiene protocol, the directorate authorizes quarantine, Nessa announced. 2 individuals will be isolated for observation. Celine stepped forward. Ooh, Nessa glanced at the list. Raska Jun and Taylor Jun, she said. They were closest to the contaminated drum. Raska and Taylor stood together, hands trembling. Celine moved toward them, but the guards shifted in front of her. Jace felt the room narrow. They are not sick, he said. You have no symptoms and no lab confirmation. The medical officer answered, voice clipped. Exposure risk is enough, he said. We prevent spread. Varia's fingers tightened around her dose meter. They are your leverage, she said. Nessa's tone stayed polite. Compliance ensures support, she replied. Non-compliance escalates. Celine looked at Jace, and he saw the calculation behind her eyes. Give them a small sample of weave, get the 2 back, get access to clean water. And antibiotics. Save lives today. Risk losing everything tomorrow. She did not want to be brave. She wanted her people breathing next week. Varia stepped close to Celine and spoke low, but Jace heard it. If you give one seam, they will ask for the next, Varia said. They will take the whole harness and call it gradual aid. Jace stepped between Celine and the guards. If you take them through me, he said. Nessa studied him, then the braided band hooked to his glove. Technician Marrow, I will note obstruction, Nessa said. Upward notes become orders. Jace did not move. Then, let it travel, he replied. The guards hesitated. The medical officer looked away. For a moment, the system had a problem. It could not file easily. Celine took Raska's hand. Then she took Taylor's. She pulled them back into the Kethri line. The clan closed ranks without shouting, bodies placed where bodies mattered. Her voice stayed even. They stay, she said. Nessa's smile returned, thinner than before. Then your support package is suspended pending review, she replied. She turned and left, guards in step. Jace watched them go and felt the true shape of the threat. It was not a raid. It was a slow tightening, a clean process, a chain made of forms and shortages. Celine stood beside him. They will starve us with kindness. They can withdraw, she said. Jace nodded. And they will march their corridor with meters that lie, he said. If we cannot break that, we die in a way that looks orderly. Varia looked toward the belt, where the air shimmered faintly. Then we learn how to break paper, she said. Before dawn, the wind turned, and the belt answered. At Rimhold Outpost, the wall dose meter clicked faster than yesterday. Jace Marrow watched the line climb and tasted metal in his mouth. Celine Rusk entered the bay with dust on her sleeves. Varia Rusk followed, holding a handheld dose meter close. It closed early, Celine said. No window today. A perimeter runner arrived, filter stained and voice thin. Radiant Scar Edge, he said. 7 Kethri pinned. 2 coolant spines overheated. We need a tech. Jace grabbed his kit and the last sealed bottle of water. He added a roll of seal thread and tubing, then climbed into a rover. They found the group behind a slab of rock. 7 Kethri crouched low, harness plates dull with pitting. Two people lay with their drift plate harness frames open, coolant spines exposed like ribs. Varia touched a spine housing and pulled back. Dry, she said. No water left to pull heat. Jace checked both failures. One spine had a cracked return line. The other had a shoulder seam where seal thread had shredded into fuzz. He forced his voice steady. I can make one harness safe enough to move now, he said. The other needs time we may not have. Various stared at him. Which one? Jace looked at the two faces. One was older, breathing shallow. The other was younger, shaking but alert. He hated the math, but the belt demanded it. Older first, he said. Their reserve is gone. Celine moved to the younger patient and held their hand. She did not argue, but her silence carried the cost. Jace poured a thin stream of water over the older spine. Steam rose and vanished. He wrapped the cracked line with a patch sleeve and tightened hard. The older patient coughed, then pulled a fuller breath. The spine temperature dropped enough to buy a short walk. Jace turned to the second harness. Varia had already cleaned the shoulder channel, eyes sharp. The groove is worn, Jace said. New thread may not bite. Varia placed a sliver of sable glass weave under the channel. Use it, she said. Spread the stress. Jace pressed the sliver in and laid the thread. Heat set it fast while meters clicked faster. A soldier shouted from above. Dust is turning. Move now. Jace lifted the lamp. The thread was not fully cured, but he had no more minutes. Stand, he told the younger patient. Slow. No sudden pull. They rose, swayed, and took a step. The seam held, then gave a faint hiss. Jace saw the hairline gap open where the groove had been chewed too deep. He moved to clamp the plate, but his glove slipped on grit. The patient coughed once hard, then sagged. Celine caught them and lowered them to the ground. Jace felt for a pulse and found only a flutter that faded. No one called it fate. The gap had been real, and the time to fix it had been stolen. As they prepared to move, Jace pointed to the three who could still walk. You go first with the older harness, he said. Keep your plates closed. We have minutes, he said. If we stand here, the dose climbs. They took the first steps in silence, boots crunching grit, each breath filtered and thin. Jace stayed near the older patient, watching the patched line for mist and the spine housing for heat. Halfway back, the older patient stumbled. Jace caught an elbow and felt how light the body was beneath the plates. Keep moving, he said. We rest inside the rover shadow. When they reached the rover, Jace checked his meter and did not speak the reading. He only tightened his gloves and looked back once at the ridge, then forced himself to climb in. That night, under the bay lights, the clan made space for a small farewell. They laid the body on a clean tarp and marked a scrap plate with a simple notch for the seam. A young Kethri asked, Was it my fault for bringing the harness out there? Celine answered no. The belt did what it does. Varia looked at Jace, eyes wet but clear. Family is not a word, she said. It is the weight you carry when the repair fails. Jace nodded once. I will carry it, he said. 2 days later, thirst still ruled the outpost. The brigade depot near Saltwind Flats was fenced and labeled as support. Everyone knew it was a choke point where supplies became obedience. Varia wanted in. Seal thread, coolant sleeves, filter cores, she said. We take what they stole by paperwork. Celine shook her head. If we get caught, they split our line, then call it protection. Jace traced the depot layout from memory. We do not win by trading punches, he said. We win by forcing their plan to face its own limits. Celine studied him. You want their corridor to fail? I wanted to stop being fed by lies, Jace said. They lower dose numbers so soldiers would not hesitate. That lie will kill them, and it will kill you. Varia did not look away. They will never stop taking unless something breaks, she said. A soft knock came at the alcove. Medic Rowan Pike stepped in, dusty and tired, hands raised. I saw the radiant ledger tables, Rowan said. The dose values are pushed down on purpose. Celine's voice was cold. Why tell us? Rowan swallowed. Because a private collapsed. Yesterday, and the printout said he was safe, he said. He begged me to tell his wife the numbers were wrong. I stayed quiet. I cannot do that again. Jace held his gaze. Help us or walk away. Rowan nodded once. After second shift, camera cycle to diagnostics for 10 minutes, he said. The gate code changes daily. I can open it once. Jace packed a small heat flare charge. Varia packed tools that could work without light. By late afternoon, wind noise covered small sounds. Jace and Varia moved along the fence line in driftplate cloaks that broke up their heat. Rowan met them at a service gate, fingers shaking on the keypad. The lock clicked. 10 minutes, Rowan whispered. Inside, stacks of crates sat under tarps. Labels marked seal thread and coolant sleeves. Varia loaded thread first, shoving rolls deep into her bag. Jace took filter cores and tubing, choosing the ones with intact seals. He paused at a crate marked medical coolant packs. He took 2, then stopped. If we take too much, they know, he said. If we take too little, someone dies, Varia replied. Jace kept the second pack. In the corner, unmarked plates were wrapped in polymer. Varia peeled a corner back and froze. Sable glass, she said. They already have it. Jace forced his hands steady. He did not take the weave. He loosened a bolt pattern and reversed 2 spacers, then reseated the plate so it looked untouched. A small change. Invisible today. Dangerous when someone ran hot through the belt and trusted a meter that lied. A faint buzz sounded overhead. Varia looked up. Hush drone. The drone slipped between rafters, sensors turning. It should have been blind during diagnostics. This one was awake. Rowan's face drained. That is not routine. The drone tilted and tracked them. It did not fire. It did not need to. It simply watched and remembered their heat. A voice boomed from outside the yard. Stand where you are. Hands visible. A second voice closer called, Rowan Pike, step out. Rowan flinched. They traced my access, he whispered. Jace pressed the heat flare charge into Rowan's palm. Drop it when you run, he said. Not before. Rowan stared at it like a verdict, then nodded once. They moved in short bursts between stacks, stopping when boots passed a row away. Jace felt sweat collect at his collar, and fought the urge to wipe it. At the gate, Rowan ran first. He dropped the flare into yard dust and kept running. It did not burn bright. It burned hot, a thin spear of heat that smeared the sensors. The drone swung toward the flare for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. Jace and Varia slipped out the service gate and fell into the wind, letting grit strip warmth from their cloaks. Alarms rose into overlapping shouts. They ran low and fast across salt wind flats, using wind ridges as cover. The grit cut their cheeks and filled the seams of their cloaks. Varia kept the bag close. If we drop this, it was for nothing, she said. We keep what keeps people alive, Jace replied. He pulled one coolant sleeve out and shoved it into an inner pocket, then cinched the bag tighter. The hushed drone followed at a distance, never close enough to be struck, never far enough to be forgotten. At a shallow drainage cut, they dropped into the trench and crawled through cold dust. The drone passed overhead and lingered, then drifted on. They climbed out on the far side and vanished in a broken rock. From there, Jace could see guards surrounding someone near the gate. Jace turned away before Varia could look back for too long. The next morning, the order arrived with a voice that sounded like care. Director Halden Core appeared on every outpost screen. His tone was warm, and that made it worse. The Scriptwrite Directorate authorizes immediate relocation of the Kethri clans, Core said. This prevents unnecessary exposure and ensures stable support. Celine listened without blinking. Varia's jaw tightened. Jace felt anger rise and settle into something colder. A second message followed, stamped by the Ashline Security Brigade. Kethri Forge Hold will be secured, the message read. Unauthorized repair activity is suspended. Technician Jace Marrow is detained for interference with security logistics. 2 armored guards entered the bay before the line finished. Field Auditor Nessa Quill followed, tablet in hand, expression smooth. Technician Marrow, Nessa said, this is administrative detention. Cooperate and it stays procedural. Celine stepped forward. He is bound to us, she said. Nessa glanced at her tablet. The bond is noted. Security overrides it. Outside, convoy engines rolled toward Kethri Forge Hold. The official notice called it relocation support. The boots and shield said seizure. Nessa offered Celine a stylus. Signed a resettlement agreement. It grants water, medicine, housing. Celine stared at the stylus, as if it were a blade. She looked past it to her clan waiting at the door, cups in hand, eyes on her. Jace shook his head once. Do not sign. Celine set the stylus down. I will not, she said. A live transmission cut in. Vale's voice was sharp. Proceed under force compliance, Vale said. Mark the forge as hostile. Remove leadership. The guards stepped closer. One reached for Varia. Nessa spoke without raising her voice. Varia Rusk is classified as a security risk. She will be separated for questioning. Varia's eyes hardened. You need my hands to make your theft work, she said. We need compliance, Nessa replied. Not consent. In the admin pod, they sat Jace at a metal table and slid a charged sheet across the surface. Sabotage of logistics assets. Interference with a security operation. Threat to public benefit. Jace read the lines once. Where's the line about poison water? He asked. A clerk answered without looking up. Not relevant to this case, he said. Jace felt a slow heat in his chest. Then your case is a lie, he said. No one argued. They did not need to. When they walked him back to the holding room, he passed a corridor where Kethri elders were being tagged for medical isolation. The tags looked like care, but the guards holding the doors looked like control. As they pulled Jace toward the admin pod, a public schedule flashed on the outpost board. It listed Harrow Pass entry at first light, next cycle. Beneath it, an exposure allowance per hour looked calm and false. The timeline was clean. The dose meter on Jace's wrist was not. It clicked faster with every step. From a side room, Jace saw Rowan Pike seated under a bright lamp, medic badge on the table like it had been revoked. Rowan looked up, eyes bloodshot, then looked away. Celine called after Jace, voice steady but thin. We will keep the line together. Varia shouted, the first break in her control. Jace, how do we stop the corridor? Jace turned his head as far as the restraint allowed. Find the weak seams, he said. Hide truth where their forms cannot reach it. That night, alone in a narrow holding room, Jace watched his wrist meter climb another step. Beyond the walls, engines warmed for Harrow Pass. The belt waited to collect whatever the paper had approved. Jace Marrow learned the holding yard by sound. The fence buzzed when wind pushed charged dust through it. Floodlights hummed all night. Somewhere beyond the wall, engines warmed for Harrow Pass like an impatient throat clearing. His room was a converted storage cell near the irradiated scrap lot. They called it temporary housing for detainees. The air said otherwise, dry and metallic, as if every breath had been filtered too many times. On the second morning, a guard walked him past the scrap lot on purpose. The message was simple. This is where unwanted things end up. The lot held bent plates, cracked cooling spines, and shielding panels that had failed in ways nobody wanted to report. A heap of dark tiles lay under a tarp, tagged as hazardous waste. Jace slowed, eyes on the tiles. They were dense and slightly glossy, not like ordinary polymer. He had seen that sheen before in sable glass weave offcuts, but this was different. These tiles were made to soak heat and hold it like a sponge that never dripped. A guard snapped. Keep moving. Jace kept moving, but he stored the shape in his mind. Soldiers believed armor was safety. Command believed safety was a schedule. Both beliefs broke when heat had nowhere to go. Back in the cell, Jace pressed his palm against the wall and felt warmth trapped in the metal. He imagined those tiles packed behind a plate stack, pulling heat out fast at first, then saturating. The cooling system would chase a rising load until it could not. The wearers would not die from a bullet. They would stop, then cook, then panic. That was the weakness, not the plate, the water behind it. Hours later, footsteps came that were not a guard's heavy rhythm. The door latch clicked, and Celine Rusk stepped in with 2 escorts. The guards held their hands close to their sidearms. They watched Celine like she carried spark. Jace stood. The ring in his pocket felt heavier than before. What did you get in here? He asked. Celine kept her voice calm. Forge bond, she said. They fear a riot more than they fear us. They let me speak as your family. One guard frowned. 5 minutes. Celine did not look at him. She looked at Jace's wrists, at the faint marks from the restraint band, then at his eyes. Varia? Jace asked. Separated, Celine said. They moved her near the depot. They want her hands and her silence. Jace's jaw tightened. And forge hold. They are staging near it, Celine replied. They say resettlement. The trucks say seizure. Jace took a breath and forced his mind back to what could be done. He spoke quietly, as if the walls listened. In the scrapyard there are tiles that store heat, he said. If those tiles sit where cooling expects quick transfer, the system will saturate. Then the spine runs hot. The convoy must slow. That buys time. Celine's gaze sharpened. You want to stop Harrow Pass? I wanted to stall long enough for truth to reach command, Jace said. We cannot outgun them. We can outlast their cooling. Celine nodded once. Say it plainly. What do you need? Jace swallowed. A lure, he said. A marker that looks harmless. Something that makes their thermal profile lie to them. It does not explode. It just loads heat and dose until their engines must idle. Celine watched his mouth form the idea, then asked the question that mattered. Who places it? Jace did not answer at first. The belt did not forgive hero fantasies. It only counted exposure. The placement must be deep enough, he said. Near the corridor path. If it is too shallow, they detour. If it is deep, the person carrying it takes the dose. The guard cleared his throat. Time. Celine stepped closer, voice even. We will place it, she said. But we do not waste lives for a symbol. We do it to keep the line breathing. Jace felt something loosen in his chest and something tighten in his throat. Tell Varia not to go alone, he said. Celine held his gaze. She will try, she replied. I will not let her vanish without a plan. The door opened. The guards moved in. Celine touched Jace's forearm, brief and steady, then walked out without looking back. Jace listened to her footsteps fade. In the silence, the fence buzz returned. The engines beyond the wall kept warming for Harrow Pass. That night, Varia Rusk found a way to speak through a seam. A rolled strip of seal thread arrived with Jace's meal tray, tucked under the metal cup. On the inside of the strip, a single line was scratched with a tool tip. Cinder Ridge at dusk. Jace stared at it until the guard told him to eat. He ate anyway. Hunger did not pause for plans. At dusk, the holding yard shifted. Guards changed posts. Lights moved. In that brief choreography, Celine arrived again, this time with an escort who looked away as if he did not want to see. They walked Jace out to the perimeter gate, not free, but not dragged. Celine spoke to the gate officer, calm and firm, and invoked Forge Bond again. The officer hesitated, then waved them through with a warning about public order. Cinder Ridge was a broken line of black rock east of the outpost, close enough for dust to sting, far enough that voices could fall into the wind. Varia waited in shadow, driftplate cloak wrapped tight, bag slung low. She did not greet Jace with relief. She greeted him with a plan. I go in, Varia said. I place the lure deep. I can breathe in the belt if I pace my cooling. I know the harness like skin. Jace shook his head. You cannot pay that dose alone. It is my clan, Varia replied. My forge. My hands they are stealing. Celine lifted a water bottle and set it on a rock between them like a third vote. We split risk, she said. We split time. We split water. Varia's eyes flashed. You cannot go deep. You lead the line. Celine did not soften. I will not ask you to do what I will not share, she said. Jace looked from one sister to the other. He saw the truth. The bond was not romance. It was a contract with physics signed by flesh. We do it in layers, Jace said. We carry the heat tiles in a shell that looks like scrap. We seed them along the corridor approach, not as a bomb, but as a load. The convoy will run hotter every minute. Their cooling spines will chase it and fail. They will stop or they will burn. Varia nodded, already moving the idea into steps. And the marker? A strip of sable glass weave, Jace said. Place where their sensors read it as ordinary shielding. They will trust it. They will stack plates. They will trap heat. Celine crouched and began to lay out supplies. Seal thread, coolant sleeves, filter, core, 2 water bottles, too small for what they needed. We rest at Cinder Ridge first, Celine said. Then we move when the wind eases. We do not sprint. Sprinting kills cooling. Varia tightened a shoulder seam on her harness and checked the groove with a probe. Your repair holds, she said to Jace, not as praise, but as acknowledgement. Jace knelt and checked Celine's harness seams. He did not speak in promises. He spoke in clamps and pressure. Celine offered the first water bottle to Varia. Varia hesitated, then took a sip and handed it back without wiping the rim. That small act carried more weight than vows. Jace took the second bottle and held it, then placed it into Celine's pack. You lead the withdrawal, he said. If one of us drops, you pull the line. Celine nodded once. I will. From the ridge, a faint whine drifted on the wind. Jace's skin tightened. Varia looked up. Hush drone. It floated far off, a dark fleck against gray sky. It did not flash lights. It did not announce itself. It simply matched their direction, as if the air belonged to it. A second shape moved on the ridge line to the north, a person's silhouette with a long scope. Jace recognized the posture from outpost briefings. Scout Chief Tamsin Crow, Jace said. Celine's expression did not change, but her hands moved faster, packing supplies. They turned our retreat into a hunt, she said. Varia's voice lowered. Then we stopped, leaving heat footprints. Jace pulled a scrap cloak over Varia's pack to break its thermal shape. He did the same for Celine, then for himself. Their outlines became less human and more like moving debris. They left Cinder Ridge in short, controlled steps. Behind them, the drone kept its distance, patient as a meter. By morning, Harrow Pass had a crowd. Convoy trucks lined up beyond rimhold, plates shining under floodlights, cooling spines humming. Soldiers stood with weapons down, but ready. The whole scene looked like Control, until you listened long enough to hear the strain in the engines. Director Halden Core arrived in person, surrounded by aides and cameras. He stepped onto a raised platform and spoke as if he carried relief. This operation ends a cycle of loss, Core said. We take a hard path, so the larger population does not. Jace watched from a fence corner. Near the staging yard, wrists bound again, escorted by guards who wanted him visible. Celine stood farther back with a cluster of Kethri elders, watched by officers who called it protection. Core's eyes swept the crowd and landed on Celine. He offered a small nod, the kind of leader gives a problem he intends to solve. Jay saw the opening and took it. He leaned toward a junior clerk near the comm card. Send this to Orion Compact Oversight, Jace said. Raw dose logs from Rimhold, Kethri meters, and the brigade ledger tables. All of it. The clerk blinked. Who are you to order that? Jace held his gaze. A man who can prove your numbers are wrong, he said. Do you want your name on a death count that was avoidable? The clerk hesitated. His fingers hovered over the console. Then a sharp voice cut through the noise. Colonel Brannick Vale strode in, visor tucked under his arm, face tight with urgency. He did not speak to the crowd. He spoke to the chain of command. Move them, Vale said. Now. A pair of guards dragged Kethri forward, wrist tied, faces pale. Jace recognized them. Raska Jun and Taylor Jun. Celine's breath hitched once, then steadied. She stepped forward until a guard blocked her. Vale pointed toward the belt edge, where dust shimmered. They walk with the first vehicles, he said. If sabotage occurs, their exposure increases. If cooperation occurs, they return. Jace's stomach dropped. It was not a threat of bullets. It was a threat of minutes. Core did not object. He looked away as if logistics were beneath him. That avoidance was its own confession. Celine's eyes found Jace through the fence. She did not beg. She assessed. They fear cameras, she said softly, more to herself than to him. They fear losing their story. Jace understood. Vale was willing to sacrifice hostages for speed, but Core needed to keep the operation moral in public. That was the crack. The convoy siren sounded. Engines rose. Cooling spines hummed louder, chasing heat that had not even arrived yet. The first vehicles rolled toward Harrow Pass, dust curling around their wheels. The belt waited beyond, indifferent and hungry. If the lure failed, Kethri Forgehold would vanish in a single day, and the paperwork would call it necessary. Harrow Pass looked like a cut in the planet. Black ridges rose on both sides, and the wind funneled through them with a thin, constant hiss. Dust hung low, bright with charge, and every breath tasted like warm metal. The Ashline Security Brigade, Convoy, entered in a tight line. Lead vehicles wore fresh plate stacks, their cooling spines humming with confidence. Soldiers rode behind sealed shutters, believing the belt had been measured and tamed. They had been told the drift plate harness was understood now. They had been told the risk was managed. Under the gravel, the lure waited. It did not flare. It did not detonate. It only did what heat always did when it had nowhere to go. The heat sink tiles scavenged from the scrap. Lots sat where the plates would greedily pull warmth. For the first stretch, the vehicles felt stable. Then the tiles saturated. Heat that should have moved into the air stayed, trapped inside armor cavities and between layer panels. Cooling pumps spun faster. Fans whined. The spines ran hot. A soldier in the second vehicle slapped the inside of his door panel when his dose meter chirped. He stared at the display, then at the squad leader. "We just crossed a warning line?" he asked. The squad leader checked the convoy status feed. The Radiant Ledger summary on the dash still read safe. "Keep moving," the leader said. His voice sounded like a rule, not a thought. More dose meters began to chirp. Alerts blinked in small red pulses, quick and impatient. In the lead vehicle, an officer frowned and tapped the dash again, as if the safe label could override the noise. On the open channel, a young driver spoke too fast. "My dose meter says high. The ledger says green. Which one is real?" Silence answered first. Then a harder voice came through, clipped and certain. "This is Colonel Brannick Vale," the voice said. "Radiant Ledger is the standard. Stay on schedule." A second driver replied, "Sir, my crew is sweating through filters. Cooling is chasing heat. Build it, not pause. If you stop, you lose the pass," he said. "If you lose the pass, you extend the war. You keep moving." The convoy pushed deeper. Gravel popped under tires. Dust rose in sheets that rubbed against plates and turned into extra heat. In the fourth vehicle, a coolant pump seized for 2 seconds, then caught again. That wobble was enough to spike temperature. The driver felt it in the steering column, a tremor that traveled through metal like fear. A heavy carrier near the middle began to slow. Its engine tone dropped, then surged, then dropped again. Its cooling spine vented a thin plume that turned to invisible steam in the charged air. The carrier stopped. A soldier leaned out a side hatch, visor reflecting the gray haze. He looked back down the line and saw 2 figures dragged forward by guards. Their wrists were tied. Their boots scraped, slow and unwilling. Raska Jun, Taylor Jun. The hostages were being used as ballast for obedience. The soldier swallowed and spoke into the channel. "Sir, the carrier is stuck," he said. "It is overheating." Vale replied without softness. "Bypass it. Pass is too narrow," the soldier said. "If we bunch up, dose rises for everyone." Vale cut in sharp. "Then you push it." He climbed. Dose climbed. The belt did not negotiate. Behind the ridge line, a small drone drifted and watched the jam build, as if recording a lesson. Jace Marrow saw the stalled carrier on a monitor in the holding yard and felt his stomach drop. He was not in the pass. He was behind fences where paperwork said he belonged. But the belt was still his enemy, and the convoy had brought his family into it. Celine and Varia stood on the far side of the yard fence with a guard between them. Their faces were gray with dust, their eyes fixed on the live feed. Jay spoke low, tried to keep his voice from breaking. "They pulled the hostages forward," he said. "They will burn time until someone folds." Varia's hands tightened on the wire. "Let Vale cook in his own lie," she said. "He earned it." Jace understood the temptation. Lock the withdrawal route. Let the pass close. Let the belt do the killing, clean and silent, and call it consequence. He looked at Celine. She did not celebrate the idea. She did not recoil from it either. She only watched the feed and measured what it would do to them. "If we win like him, we keep living, but we learn his shape," Celine said. "We learn to trade lives for outcomes." Varia's voice sharpened. "He already traded ours." Celine turned to her sister. "If we copy him, we will do it again someday," she said. "Under a different reason." Jace exhaled slowly. He felt the ring in his pocket like a weight that pulled him toward the decision he did not want. I'm going in, Jace said. A guard snapped. You are detained. Celine stepped forward, calm and dangerous. Forge bond, she said. If you keep him here and my clan dies in that pass, your yard becomes a riot. The guard hesitated. He looked toward the admin pod, then back at Celine. He did not want blood on his shift report. Varia leaned in, voice low. If you go in, you take dose, she said. It stacks. It never refunds. I know, Jace said. Celine placed a water bottle against the fence so Jace could take it. She did not smile. Bring them back, she said. Jace grabbed a tool pouch, 2 coolant sleeves, and a spool of seal thread. He tucked a small data drive into his glove cuff, the one Rowan Pike had slipped to him during the chaos. It contained raw dose logs and the ledger offsets, the proof that numbers had been pushed down on purpose. At the gate, the same junior clerk from the comm cart hovered, pale and unsure. Jace caught his eye. Open a channel to Orion Compact Oversight, Jace said. Not the brigade. Not the directorate. Oversight. The clerk whispered, they will see I sent it. Then send it with my name on it, Jace said. Put on me. The clerk swallowed and nodded once. Jace ran to the rover line and drove hard toward Harrow Pass, following the convoy's dust plume. His dose meter clicked faster as the air grew hotter and thinner. At the jam, soldiers shouted over engine noise. The stalled carrier sat like a grounded beast, plates shimmering with heat. 2 guards held Raska and Taylor near the lead vehicle, close enough that everyone could see the stakes. Colonel Brannick Vale stood beside his command truck, visor under his arm, face set in a hard line. His uniform looked clean, but his eyes looked tired, like a man who had stopped believing in anything except winning. Jace stepped out of the rover and raised both hands. I can cool the carrier enough to move, Jace called. But the dose data you are using is false. Vale turned slowly, recognizing him. Technician Marrow, Vale said, you are a problem that should have stayed in a cell. You altered the ledger, Jace said. It would hold for minutes. Then he did something worse. He climbed onto the rear deck and pulled a small charge from his pouch. Not an explosive, but a cutter designed for metal frames. He jammed it into a junction point where the carrier's cooling manifold fed the auxiliary plate stack. A soldier shouted, what are you doing? Ending the illusion, Jace said. He triggered the cutter. It bit into the manifold with a harsh whine and a spray of sparks. Coolant flashed into vapor. The plate stack began to lose its false stability. The carrier would move, but would not be safe to keep pushing into the belt. Vale rushed forward, face dark. You just crippled a key asset. I crippled your ability to pretend, Jace said. Now you stop, or you cook. A calm beep scream from the oversight channel. The junior clerk's voice, shaking, came through loud. Orion Compact Oversight is online, the clerk said. They're requesting raw logs and ledger tables now. A new voice cut in, older and colder than Vale's. This is Oversight Marshal Dan Hollis, the voice said. Colonel Vale, stand down. Director Corps, identify yourself. The crowd stilled. Even the wind seemed to pause for a breath. Vale looked up at the comm unit like it had betrayed him. He tried to speak, but the words did not land. Celine leaned toward Jace, quiet. They fear losing the story more than losing people, she said. Jace's dose meter clicked fast enough to feel like an insect under his skin. He kept his voice steady anyway. Marshal Hollis, Jace said, your standard ledger is offset. My logs prove it. The convoy is already over safe exposure. The marshal answered, sharp. Transmit now. All units halt and begin withdrawal. Vale's face tightened into something small and human. A man cornered by truth he could not shoot. He turned and barked, no. Keep moving. A group of soldiers did not obey. They looked at their chirping meters, then at the open channel, then at the hostages walking back behind Celine. For the first time, Vale's authority broke not by a bullet, but by comparison. By late afternoon, the convoy was pulling back in a staggered line, cooling spines venting, engines coughing in dust. The stalled carrier was towed with plates stripped, its pride left on the gravel. Director Halden Corps arrived at the staging yard with aides and cameras, but the cameras were no longer his shield. They were his witness. Oversight Marshal Dan Hollis spoke through the same feed that had carried Corps' warm promises. Director Corps, the Marshal said, "You authorized altered safety metrics. You will be suspended pending inquiry." Corps' face tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing defense would become confession. The Kethri clans were released from the resettlement hold. The guard called it de-escalation. Celine called it survival bought with truth. Kethri Forge hold remained standing, but it did not feel secure. It felt like a place that had been measured by enemies and found valuable. That evening, Celine and Varia led Jace into the forge hall. The cold anvil rig stood in the center like a heart made of metal, its surfaces scarred by years of use. Jace touched the frame where he had sabotaged connections earlier in the chaos. The rig would need weeks of repair. Parts were scarce. The sacrifice was real. Varia looked at the damage and did not accuse him. She only asked, did it save them? It saved time, Jace said. Time saved them. Celine stepped closer. And you, she said. Your meter kept climbing. Jace shrugged, trying to downplay it, but his hands trembled. The belt had taken its fee. Varia pulled out a stack of worn wrist meters and set them on the anvil bench. Teach us, she said. Teach us to read the dose without anyone choosing the number for us. Jace nodded once. We start with baselines, he said, then drift checks, then cross checks. No single ledger gets to be the truth again. Days later, under a calmer sky, they forged a new harness frame. It was not prettier. It was more honest. Cooling channels were simpler to inspect. Seal grooves were cut deeper and cleaner. The plates were arranged so heat could escape instead of being trapped by pride. Celine watched the first test with arms crossed, eyes tired. Varia held the dose meter and listened to its click, not afraid of it, but respectful. Jace tightened the last seam and stepped back. This one fits better, Varia said. It is not for going deeper into war, Celine said. It is for walking people out. Jace looked at them, the sisters who had turned a rescue into a bond, and realized the bond had already happened in every choice that cost them something. The belt still hissed beyond the ridge. War still demanded payment. But in the forge hall, the truth was no longer a weapon that belonged to someone else. Kindness had a place, as long as someone was willing to pay for it in work and in time. The wind over Harrow Pass never learned mercy. It only learned patterns. Back at Kethri Forge Hold, the forge heat felt different. The war had not ended, but the truth no longer belonged to a ledger that could be edited. Jace Marrow stayed, not for reward, not for rank, but because he had watched a small seam take a life, and he refused to let that happen again in silence. Celine Rusk and Varia Rusk did not ask him for promises. They asked him for hands that would not leave when the easy exit appeared. They asked him for eyes that would read the numbers out loud when power wanted them buried. They built a new drift plate harness that finally fit. Not a perfect shield, not a hero's cloak, but a tool that respected heat, water, and time. It was made to bring people home, one careful step at a time, through a world that punished mistakes without anger. Because in the end, the armor was never the point. The point was the choice to stay human when fear tried to turn everyone into a number. If this story moved you, please hit like, share it with someone who loves grounded science fiction, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next chapter. In the next chapter, the next battle will not be for territory, but for who gets to control the truth.